Now that we've wired up the environment variables and set that up in our node project, there is one slight refactor that I want to make to our project. And at the moment in our server.js file, we're just referencing this process.env.port. There's nothing wrong with doing this in general, but over time, let's say we've got 20 environment variables that we have in our environment variable file. And whenever we want to reference it, we're going to have to type out process.env over and over. And I think it's going to start making the code a little bit unneat, and it's just like kind of duplicating a little bit of code everywhere within our application. So let's think of a way that we can just set this up in a neater way. As well as there's a second point here is, for whatever reason, if the port is not available to us through the environment variable, and that could happen very easily because these .env files are normally not committed to source control. When someone creates a new folder here, they might forget to create a .env file locally, and these variables then won't be available. So to simulate that, I'm just going to delete this port, and I'll just save our work here. In a new terminal, you'll see that we get the server running on port, and it's undefined now because there is no value. And so if we pass a value of undefined into this HTTP server, the server is not going to be initialized. And so these kind of things can happen. And so we can think of a way to make our code neater, as well as to implement some fallbacks onto some of these variables in case the variable's not coming from the environment file. So let's just go back to our .env file and save our work there. And let's go ahead and rerun our API just to make sure that everything's working. The way that I want to do this is very simple. In our lib folder, let's go ahead and create a new file. I'm going to call this config.js. And this file is going to house an object that we're just going to export as a default. And it's going to contain keys and values related to all the configuration in our API. So by the end of this course, we're going to have built this up, and all the values for our whole API will be sitting within this config file. And so let's get started right away. We can say export default, and I'm just going to export a straight object out of here. And the way this object can work is we can just reference a key for every part of the config that we want. So this first key, we've been referencing this port, so we'll just say port, and then we'll assign this to the value of process.env, and then we'll reference that port. And so now we can make use of this conditional OR operator to provide us with a mechanism to have fallback values in case the variables that come from the environment are not detected. And so I'm just going to set a fallback value here of 3000. So basically this key of port is this expression that we set up here. It's first going to try and get the value of port from the environment. If it's a truthy value, it'll just return that value and assign it to the port. Otherwise, if it's undefined or any type of falsy value, it will then fall back to this next side of the expression on the right hand side, and it'll assign this value which we set 3000 to the value of port. So in this way, we've got just a little bit of safety in case the environment variable hasn't been set up. Now all we need to do is in our server.js file, we can import our config from this file that we've just created. So that'll be config.js. Now instead of referencing the process.env.port, we can now just reference the config.port. I'm going to go ahead and hit save here. And you'll see in our terminal, we keep getting that server is running on port 3000. And let's go ahead and just test this out real quick. Let's make one change. Let's say that the default port should be 9000 if it doesn't pick something up from the environment. And in our .development file, let's just remove this port here and go ahead and save your work. And if we rerun the server, I'm going to kill our server and then just rerun it. You'll see that instead of throwing an undefined or an error or saying that the port is listing on undefined, it's now fallen back to that value of 9000, which is coming from that logical OR expression. And so in this way, Node didn't detect any port variable because we deleted it, and so it just fell back onto 9000. And so that's a pretty cool mechanism that we will make use of throughout our API. I'm just going to go ahead and reset this. In the .env file, we can just reset that back to 3000 and restart our server. And you'll see now that we have our server running on port 3000 and we've wired up this configuration mechanism into our API. I think we are good to go. We've laid some very solid foundations. We've done some of that initialization and initial configuration of our API. And with all of that work that we've just done, that is a wrap for this whole module. So well done on making it this far. In the next module, we're going to start turning our attention to setting up Docker in our API. So that's going to be some really cool work we're going to go through. Looking forward to working through that with you. I'll see you in the next module. Cheers for now.